rescue.
The chair is going to insist that at this stage in the proceedings, remarks be confined to the parliamentary question that has been raised by the gentlelady from Washington.
You are correct.
And the chair will ask that if members stray further from that subject, the chair's going to have to rule them out of order.
I am not out of order, because if you would listen, I'm discussing local police, which is in the HCON Res 40, and it is in her legislation. What I'm saying is the reason why the point of order should not prevail is because her amendment discusses local police. Your amendment or your bill or the bill indicates local police. On January 6th, local police played a pivotal role in defending the Capitol. With that connection and nexus, I believe that this amendment
The
should not
gentlelady is
be
confined to the parliamentary question.
And the parliamentary question is that whether or not her amendment is germane. It is germane because both speak to, and I'll look at you, Mr. Chairman, both speak to local law enforcement. The title of the bill says local law enforcement. Local police officers were on the Capitol steps defending us. Therefore, the gentleman's point of germaneness is incorrect. Both speak to the crux of the bill, defending local law enforcement, and it has other parts to it. If you read this amendment, it is about local law enforcement. She has the words, local law enforcement. I would ask my colleagues to be fair and to allow her amendment, excuse my voice, to be debated, because in fact, there is nexus, connection, because both of them speak to local law enforcement. I ask my colleagues not to rule, I ask the chairman not to rule her amendment out of order, and that it is germane. I yield back.
Do any other members wish to be heard on the point of order? Mr. Johnson.
I would just say simply that the resolution that we're talking about expresses support for local law enforcement officers, condemns efforts to defund or dismantle local law enforcement agencies. They're introducing federal issues. This has nothing to do with January 6th, which everyone has decried. It has nothing to do with U.S. Capitol Police, which we have all supported, and many of us still have signs on our doors of our offices supporting the U.S. Capitol Police. This is a messaging issue. This is not germane. This is not germane, and the point of order should be upheld. I yield back.
Anyone else wish to be heard on the point of order? Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's Clause 7 of Rule 16, the germaneness rule, which stands for the simple proposition that an amendment must address the same subject matter as the matter being amended. So the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Washington addresses the same subject matter as the bill which she seeks to amend. The subject matter is support for law enforcement. It expands the reach to include federal law enforcement officers. It also discusses the same extraneous, if you will, information, such as violence by protesters. It discusses violence by protesters, by rioters, and so it expands what is written in the underlying legislation. So there is absolutely no question that the amendment offered is germane to the bill that it seeks to amend. And the only reason why we would have a pause in ruling the amendment germane is because folks don't like the way that it was expanded. And so, Mr. Chairman, again, if we're looking at the germaneness rule, there is just no question in the minds of even a high school student that this amendment is germane. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does anyone else wish to be heard on the point of order? Mr. Biggs.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank the gentleman from Georgia for actually agreeing that the amendment expands. That means that he's given up the game, and the reality is the point of order should be upheld. It's not germane.
I said the resolution expands beyond the issue of local law
The gentleman is not
by
recognized.
mentioning violence.
The gentleman from Arizona yields back. Does anyone else wish to be heard on the point of order? Seeing none, the chair is prepared to rule. The chair agrees with the gentleman from Georgia and the gentleman from Arizona that the amendment does expand the reach of the bill, and therefore it violates the subject matter and fundamental purpose tests. Therefore, it's not germane and it is out of order. The gentleman from New York appeals the ruling of the chair. The gentleman from Arizona moves to table the appeal. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan. Mr. Jordan votes yes. Mr. Issa. Mr. Buck. Mr. Gates. Mr. Gates votes yes. Mr. Johnson of Louisiana. Mr. Johnson of Louisiana votes yes. Mr. Biggs. Mr. Biggs votes yes. Mr. McClintock. Mr. McClintock votes yes. Mr. Tiffany. Mr. Tiffany votes aye. Mr. Massey. Mr. Roy. Mr. Bishop. Ms. Spartz. Ms. Spartz votes yes. Mr. Fitzgerald. Mr. Fitzgerald votes aye. Mr. Bentz. Mr. Bentz votes yes. Mr. Klein. Mr. Klein votes aye. Mr. Gooden. Mr. Van Drew. Mr. Van Drew votes yes. Mr. Nels. Mr. Nels votes yes. Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore votes yes. Mr. Kiley. Mr. Kiley votes yes. Ms. Hageman. Ms. Hageman votes yes. Mr. Moran. Ms. Lee. Mr. Hunt. Mr. Hunt votes yes. Mr. Fry. Mr. Fry votes aye. Mr. Nadler. Mr. Nadler votes no. Ms. Lofgren. Ms. Jackson Lee. Ms. Jackson Lee votes no. Mr. Cohen. Mr. Cohen. Mr. Cohen votes no. Mr. Johnson of Georgia. Mr. Johnson of Georgia votes no. Mr. Schiff.